In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, I bear witness there is no God but God, and Prophet Muhammad is his slave and messenger, and I seek refuge in Allah from the rejected Satan. So in this video, I'll be discussing about Allah, the unique creator of all that exists, that to reinforce that he has power over all things, that he regulates all affairs in a perfect manner. And I've got some Quran verses to help reinforce that. Also, I'd like to discuss about the 313 of Imam Mahdi, the Mashiach. I had a fellow believer, brother in the comments ask me to talk about the 313, so I'll discuss a little bit about that. So about the 313, the most obvious thing is that the 313 seems like a small number compared to the amount of believers in the world. There's billions of believers in the world, but there's only going to be a few hundred close companions to Imam Mahdi, at least in the beginning. So we're going to look at the Quran, some verses in the Quran in chapter 12 that discuss about Joseph, the story of Joseph. The whole chapter of Joseph, basically, that whole chapter 12 in the Quran is all about Joseph. So we're going to discuss about the story of Joseph to help us understand the 313 and to help us understand Imam Mahdi. So there's lots of correlations between Imam Mahdi and Joseph. So first thing to understand why 313 is such a small number. So if we look at the story of Joseph, Joseph had a really high ranking. He had a strong light, he had a spiritual superiority, and he was very close to Allah. And his father, Jacob, his favorite son, and showed most love to, was his son Joseph. He loved him a great deal. And his brothers were very jealous of that. And the brothers of Joseph didn't see his greatness, didn't see the greatness of Joseph, didn't see the light of Joseph, didn't see his closeness with Allah, the unique creator of all that exists, his spiritual superiority. So the correlation between that and Imam Mahdi is that Imam Mahdi in the beginning, people will not see his spiritual superiority, will not see his light, will not see him as Imam Mahdi. They'll see him like his brothers did as Joseph. So his brothers were very envious of that because of the love his father had for Joseph, but not for them as much. So they plotted and schemed and eventually got Joseph into the wilderness and threw him down a well. And when some trade merchants came by, they pretended to find Joseph and then sold him to the trade merchants and was sold into slavery into Egypt. So the people of Egypt also didn't recognize the greatness of Joseph, didn't recognize his great light, didn't recognize his spiritual superiority and closeness with Allah. Just like the people of today do not recognize Imam Mahdi, or in the time of Imam Mahdi, they will not recognize him in the beginning. Only a small amount, very few. So Allah tested Joseph, kept testing him, and giving him test after test. And a big test that he faced was when the woman of the home that he was a slave for was trying to seduce him. And obviously, being a man, and a woman, we have desires. So Joseph did have some desires, but he maintained the will of Allah to not commit adultery, to not fornicate. So she was trying to impose her will onto Joseph, her sexual will onto Joseph, and Joseph maintained the will of Allah, the unique creator of all that exists. Allah says in the Quran to only fulfill your lusts with your wife or your husband. Any other way of fulfilling your lust is a very sinful and very evil act. So Joseph was passing test after test. Even the women that came to see Joseph saw that he was like an angel. He was so beautiful. He was so handsome. He was like a noble angel. they could see that he was a shining light, but they still did not recognize his superiority. They still didn't truly recognize his greatness. And so, by not obeying the wrongness of that woman to fornicate with her, he was thrown into prison for some extended time. And Allah made things happen, and then he was freed from prison because he was able to understand dreams. So he was not recognized in his greatness in the beginning and when he was in Egypt. He also had a dream before his brothers threw him in a well that he saw 12 stars which represented his brothers in the heavens, and they all prostrated to Allah, the unique creator of all that exists. They submitted to his will. They submitted to his divine laws. So Joseph, at the beginning, when he first saw that dream, he didn't recognize that dream. And he was great at interpreting dreams, and that was the way that he was able to get out of the prison, by interpreting a dream for the king of Egypt. And the king of Egypt realized the situation that he was put into, the wrongdoings that they did, the perseverance and patience that he made, and by his high moral characters, he was exalted in that kingdom of Egypt. And the king gave him a lofty position in the kingdom of Egypt. So eventually his brothers had to come to Egypt for food because of the famine that was going on at that time. And at still that point, their brothers did not recognize Joseph. They couldn't see his greatness. So one thing led to another, and Joseph, they eventually realized it was Joseph, and Joseph had power over them. Joseph could have, he had authority in the land of Egypt. He could have sought his revenge, but didn't. He showed patience and showed forgiveness. He passed test after test after test, increasing his rank. And then his brothers submitted to Allah, the submission to Allah. They submitted to Allah, the unique creator of all that exists. And then he fully understood his dream from the beginning. So just like Imam Mahdi, Allah will use Imam Mahdi, the hand of Imam Mahdi, to submit the whole world to Allah, the will of Allah, the unique creator of all that exists, to have supreme dominion of Islam throughout the whole earth, just like Joseph did with his family. So that's why there's only going to be a small amount in the beginning, 313, because the people of this world will not be able to recognize Imam Mahdi. And Imam Mahdi will eventually, inshallah, bring, by the hand and leave of Allah, will bring about the global dominion of Islam, the submission to Allah of His divine laws to the whole world. So that's a little bit about the 313 and Imam Mahdi, and I'm sure there are more understandings of that in that chapter. So Allah is the regulator of all things. Allah says in chapter 13, verse 2, Allah is He who raised up the heavens without any pillars that you can see, and He occupied the throne of sovereignty. And He made the sun and the moon subservient to you. Each one of these planets pursues its course for a specified term. He regulates all affairs of this universe. He explains in detail His messages so that you may have firm conviction of the meeting with your Lord. So Allah is saying that He regulates all affairs, the planets, the moon, the sun, regulates how grass grows, regulates how human beings are created from a sperm drop. He regulates hearing and sound, sight and vision. Anything you can think of, Allah is regulating. And He has supreme understanding of all things. Allah says in chapter 13, verse 15, all those that are in the heavens and on the earth submit to Allah alone, whether they choose to obey willingly or not. And likewise do their shadows in the morning and evenings, and they are all subject to divine laws, His law of nature. So Allah is saying that you're going to submit to Allah alone, whether you choose to obey or not. So if you can choose to obey willingly or not, you are submitted to these. You are subject to these. Subject to these divine laws. For example, we do have free will. That is a law of Allah, but we don't have free will to overpower Allah in any way. So the divine laws that Allah regulates the universe with, like say the law of gravity, if you jump out of a plane without a parachute and then start willing gravity not to exist, that's not going to work. The gravity is going to operate. You don't have no will or control over the divine law of gravity. Just like the example he gives with your shadows, the shadows are subject to the laws of the universe. So in the mornings and evenings, your shadows are moving according to the laws of Allah. Even if you will your shadow not to exist or to exist or move in a different way other than as Allah makes in his laws, it cannot happen. So this is what Allah is saying: if you choose to obey willingly or not, you are all subject to these divine laws. So Allah regulates all the laws of the universe, regulates every aspect and affair in the universe, and it's our duty to understand and implement these divine laws so we can live in a harmonious and beautiful way of life in this universe. Allah says in Quran chapter 17 verse 81, and say, truth has come and falsehood has vanished away. Falsehood is indeed ever bound to vanish. Falsehood is indeed ever bound to vanish away. So by talking about these divine laws, by increasing our knowledge and applying these divine laws, we can then do away with falsehoods of this world. There's all sorts of falsehoods of this world. Every country has their own religion. They have their own doctrine called legislation. People have their own belief systems. People are anarchists or liberals or capitalists or this is or that is or communist. I mean, there's all different types of isms and belief systems, but the ultimate system is Allah, unique creator of all that exists. You can try wholeheartedly to do it on your own. You are gonna you're gonna crash and burn. 5 years ago, roughly about 5 years ago, I came to Islam. I learned about Islam. Before then, I wasn't a good role model. I was at that point, I've done, too many. I wasn't crazy in the sins, but, I had some boyfriend-girlfriend relationships that really crushed my heart, really damaged me. I had no knowledge. I was raised in ignorance, and the society that I grew up in didn't guide me at all in the right direction. And as soon as I was broken and crushed, and I didn't believe in myself anymore, but Allah still believed in me, and I told Allah, I said, I can't. I tried it my way. I tried to do it my way, but I'm just crashing and burning and broken. And I said, let's do it your way. Show me. And then 2 days later, I learned about Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. I started reading the Quran. As soon as I started reading the Quran, I felt, I just knew this is what I've been missing all my life. And then so I started reading the Quran. I also, I do a trade job, so I work a lot alone a lot of the time. So I downloaded this app on my cell phone, and I can listen to work. I can listen to the Quran while at work, or listen to lectures of benefit at work. So I have thousands of hours of listening to the Quran just from, doing my work. You can listen to the Quran, in your car, or when you're traveling or walking or doing chores around your house, resting. You can just start soaking in the Quran, the guidance of Allah, to start cleansing you from the falsehoods that we've been living in. So by speaking the truth, by living the truth, we can bring more of the presence of Allah into this world, into this universe, and it'll be more abundant and beautiful. And keep your mind beautiful. Project your mind. The images in your mind can be like a prayer, and you can imagine these divine laws permeating the world, changing the world, living these divine laws. So I hope that helps. I hope this gives some understanding and clarity of the situation. I am working on books of law of the Quran, a book of law for the Torah, and a book of law for the Gospels of Jesus, to help the main Abrahamic religions. First, I'm working on the Quran, and hopefully to have a book of law in a simplified and easy, organized way to understand, to extract these laws and commandments from the Quran, inshallah. So hopefully that will be out soon, hopefully sometime in 2019, probably around the end of the year, maybe. We'll see. And take Allah as your shield. May Allah guide and bless you, increase you in light and knowledge. Thank you so much. Peace and blessings.